Magick.me is the world's greatest school for magic, meditation, and mysticism. You can learn everything there, from chaos magic to hermeticism to meditation to how to supercharge your finances and take absolute control of your destiny. In short, you get all of the tools you need to turn chaos into beautiful, scintillating order and master your life. It's incredible. You've probably heard me talk about it on the show quite a lot. But check it out. It's growing fast. And I just want to say, if you're confused about where to start, because I have so many courses there, the Adept Initiative is the place to go. The Adept Initiative is the flagship course on Magick.me, and it contains everything you need to know to master the most profound ancient techniques of changing your consciousness and the most modern and cutting-edge tools and systems for absolutely turning your life into a masterpiece. You are really going to dig it. Go check it out, and I will see you in class. It's magick.me, magick.me.
Awesome to meet you, finally.
You too.
I've started up Magick through your classes probably about a year ago, did the original Supercharger class. And my practice has been pretty intermittent, I'd say. And I know your recommendations have been to do, meditation and whatever rituals you learn daily. I suppose I wanted to ask you, what is your key to consistent practice? How do you develop the discipline to do your magical rituals or magical practice daily? Because I've had, sort of a run up to fireworks and revelatory experiences and interesting magical synchronicities, but then it kind of either it becomes too chaotic for me to handle, or I kind of taper off doing my magical practice and it sort of dissipates. So I kind of was wondering what your personal experiences with that have been.
So from what you're saying, my guess is that you are vacillating between going too much and not enough.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably accurate. Or I suppose I'm treating it like an athletic endeavor sometimes, where I'll go for as much meditation as I can, try to push for the half hour or hour recommendation that you made. And sometimes it's too much. Other times I accomplish it, and other times I just kind of screw off and don't do it. So
first of all, congratulate. It's amazing that you're putting so much discipline into it, right? And your question demonstrates that these are the questions of people who are actually cultivating active discipline. So that's excellent and commendable. And I think that treating it like an athletic discipline is a bit of a what's the word for it? It's like it's not exactly, man, I'm at a loss for language for this. Like, okay, obviously spirituality is not an athletic discipline, right? But treating it like an athletic discipline has certain benefits and is a useful convention, if you will, right? So, but ultimately it's not. But I like to teach it this way because, by the way, the reason I teach it this way is because the alternative is people fall into this spot very frequently where they have some type of revelatory experience like you're talking about, and then they say, that's it, I've done it, I've made it, I'm a special person, and I have this great state of consciousness, and then they'll say something like, oh, my life is effortlessly magical now, and I am magic, I don't need to do magic anymore. And that's what we want to combat, because we just know from the science, particularly with meditation, it's like long-term meditation is something that needs to be cultivated, and if you don't it's use it or lose it, just like it's the same with going to the gym. So, but that said, I mean, you're working with your mind and your finer, substance and soul and all of this stuff. Now, next question is, so that's awesome. A little bit of, just to add a little bit of context. Next
Sure.
Question is, why are you doing magic?
That requires a complicated answer as well, I suppose.
What would a simple one be?
I underwent a sort of spiritual death, I suppose. I was originally Christian, but I lost my faith in that and went to pretty strict nihilistic scientific materialism.
Okay. What
and
kind of Christian, if you don't mind me asking?
Lutheran.
Okay. That's a pretty easy jump to scientific worldview.
Yeah, and it was because of a traumatic experience that I broke from the church, and after that, I realized that I wasn't really going anywhere. The worldview that I had adopted hadn't serviced the goals that I had in my life, and I wasn't accomplishing what I'd set out to accomplish.
And what had you set out to accomplish?
Well, I wanted to be a game artist.
Okay. Video game?
Video game artist.
Okay.
And I'd kind of wandered through various temp and other jobs to get there. And I suppose out of desperation more than anything, I heard you first on Duncan Trussell's podcast.
Okay.
And I heard your, plug for Magick taught me, and I basically said, what do I have to lose? I can check it out, see what it is.
Okay.
And, stuff started happening. It's basically like, I intentionally went into the practices, and it's like, oh, okay, there's something to this.
When was this, by the way? When did you start?
This is about a year ago.
Okay.
A little under a year ago. And I sort of went with I can continue my scientific materialism, but this is results oriented, right? It's not, whatever spiritual forces may be advancing these properties, it doesn't really matter. It's first off, it's benefiting my mental health, and secondly, it's helping me achieve goals that I set out intentionally, rather than just kind of passively sitting back and in a meaningless universe, I suppose.
Right. And of course, the idea that there are spiritual agencies at work that make this possible is just a theory and a model. And it's not necessary to doing magic either. You can do magic equally as well, just assuming that you're tapping into parts of your brain, or that, there are many different models. There's 6 or 7 different models to explain magic, at least, right?
Sure. And the Enochian rituals that you did around the time of your book publishing had some pretty, I was there when you did the Enochian ritual visualization, and that was an extremely powerful experience, and sort of led me back to my fight with Christianity, I suppose, or my internal struggle with it.
Right. By the way, is it a fight with Christianity or a fight with the church?
I wouldn't say so much the Christian ideology as the church and its institutions.
Right. Yes. Why do you think I teach Enochian magic?
Yeah. And
why do you think Enochian magic exists?
I guess the other part of it is that I can't see that institution claiming divinity with all its corruption. That's my main problem with it, I suppose, if I were to distill it.
Yeah, it's like believing Scientology is legitimate in the internet era.
Yeah, but that's not to knock the spiritual practices, I suppose, or the certainty that comes out of it. I've since come to terms with a lot of my religious friends, instead of just calling them idiots, So, okay. So that's why I'm doing magic, and I suppose I'm trying to figure out how to keep my practice more consistent, if not. So
I heard 2 goals in there. One is you wanting to become a game artist, and the other is trying to come to a sense of spiritual understanding of truth, your place in the universe, for lack of a better way of putting it. Is that about right?
Yeah, and the first goal has been accomplished. Like when I did your practices, that it just sort of snapped into place. I suppose.
The game artist?
Yeah. I'm currently working in the industry. So
amazing. That was a result of something you did from magic?
I mean, in my subjective experience, yes.
Like you did a ritual to get that done and it happened?
Not a specific ritual to achieve that. It was more, it was a more general statement that brought it about. I wanted to revitalize my art. I wasn't doing art anymore. So I did that sort of generic intent, and there was a lot of, unintended chaos that sprung from it, but it eventually sort of got me to a more stable and desirable place, I suppose.
Awesome. Yeah. And by the way, there's like anytime you make any substantial life change, there's a little lag.
Yeah. And
catch up, and that causes chaos. It's not bad, it's just things are shifting around.
Yeah. It gave me the perspective that those, what I perceived as painful or chaotic circumstances were just necessary for change to occur. And it's sort of rippling out amongst my friend circle as well. Other people are having these sort of chaotic experiences to get them out of situations they don't want to be in anymore.
Okay. Which, by the way, is not your responsibility unless you make it your responsibility. It's a lot harder to get where you want to go when you're trying to drag other people.
Yeah. Yes. I keep just reminding myself to shut the fuck up about this stuff. Like, I don't want to talk about it.
Don't make my mistake.
Well, it's more, like you said, it can have some pretty negative reception. And so far, pretty much only my closest friends know that I even do it. Because it's still sort of, I guess for lack of a better term, embarrassing. Or either that, or I don't feel personally embarrassed about it. I feel more embarrassed about what my previous identity was before I started doing this. And it's really difficult to explain without people experiencing it.
It's very hard to, identities are propped up by references. So particularly peer groups and objects, music you listen to, things like this, environment. So it's very hard to make substantial personality changes and maintain the exact same environment or peer group. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. So meaning, and this, by the way, pertains particularly to discipline. One of the best ways to maintain discipline is get into a supportive environment. And that means cultivate an environment with supportive references for your new identity. So not all, because you don't want all woo friends. Trust me, that's that's not a good idea either. You want to stay grounded too, but it's good to cultivate some new reference points. Now, in terms of your question, let me circle back. Discipline. The reason that I asked the question, why are you doing magic, is because ultimately the thing that determines your discipline in doing anything is a strong enough reason why you're doing it. Right. So, for instance, when I first started doing magic, my overwhelming reason why was because I wanted to see if it was real. And lo and behold, I mean, obviously everything's subjective, but lo and behold, here we are, right? I proved that one pretty quick. My next overwhelming reason why is because I wanted, I wanted to be a successful adult, right? It was like, I wanted to I wanted to get a book contract. I wanted to get my word out there. I wanted, to meet other people. I wanted, people to like me, all this stuff. So it was all about making myself more powerful, right? But for lack of a better word, or just myself fulfilling my desires, which is important, by the way. I don't knock it. Fulfilling your own desires is rather crucial, as long as they don't hurt people. And then ultimately, and then my desire for magic, once I got to a certain level, particularly once I gone through some really rough experiences, my desire for magic truly did become, I want I want to help. I want to participate in the great work of enlightening all human consciousness, right? Like I want human beings to be free and liberated and spiritually aware, right? And it has been that since my mid-20s. And you get to this point where it's like, particularly with magic, you get to a point where you're whatever, your ego is, this is a cliche, but your sense of having an individual personality is much less distinct. Let's put it that way. It becomes much more about serving other people, at least on the right-hand path, which to my mind is really the only path. Left-hand path kind of leads to nowhere ultimately. But also, and now my overwhelming reason why I am teaching this stuff and doing this is because I want to directly benefit people in the world. And so I don't know if you followed my Twitter, a lot of what I've been doing is raising money for children in Nepal, raising money for children in Africa, raising money, and I raise money for Genesis, my mentor, because I've got to a point where it's like, spiritual enlightening people spiritually only goes so far. We need to take care of their material circumstances as well. So now my overwhelming motivating reason why I do what I do is saving hungry people, let's be honest, right? And that turns out to be an extremely powerful motivator for pushing. Right now, I'm pushing harder than I certainly than I have since I was finishing the book. Right. So it may be harder. So now those may not be your reasons, but what I'm pointing out is, yes, you can discipline yourself. You can set timers. You can do a schedule. You can do a checklist. You can say, oh, I'm only going to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to reward myself. I'm going to punish myself. But ultimately, those are all conventions. You need a reason why that's so overwhelmingly powerful that you wake up first thing in the morning hungry for it. It pulls you towards it. And then everything else comes afterwards. And if you don't have an overwhelming reason, then maybe you do for something else, right? Maybe it's something that is not magic, right? And it's not like you should force it, but I think you get my point, right? It's like you need a reason that is so compelling that it pulls you almost against your will towards the goal. And for most people, by the way, I want to caveat this. For most people, particularly I'm guessing almost all of my students, right? For everyone in the lower grades, to put a convention on it, which is not that important, but let's say for sake of convention, for everyone in the lower grades beneath Tefereth, right? The overwhelming reason is enlightenment. The overwhelming reason is accomplishing the individual great work of connecting with the higher self, and distinguishing the higher self purifying your mind, reaching towards the higher self, and understanding that those are two different things, and then ultimately uniting with one's own higher self. For all human beings all human beings who are in the process of spiritual awakening, that should be a momentous enough goal in itself, because it's a tremendous amount of work. And ultimately, you can't really do stuff to affect the world effectively until you've reached that level of, at least not without burning out. And without getting to at least the Tefereth level of individual integration, let's say, right? So ultimately, and I don't want to get too into jargon, but let's say Tefereth, or just union with one's own higher self and true will, becomes a potent enough strange attractor in the early grades to just pull you towards it if you're doing magic correctly. Now, if you're doing magic like a sorcerer, meaning you're just doing it to fulfill your goals or to get certain things, then that ultimately is not potent enough to keep you going. And this is why we see people who just get into magic out of curiosity or the need to fulfill certain idle desires and go no further. They only get so far. And they might be magicians for their whole lives. They might be public magicians. They might be authors. They might make a whole career out of it. But ultimately, if it's just about getting their needs met, then that is a piddling reason. Like there are an infinite ways to get your needs met. And magic is one way, and it works great. And if you're a magician, go ahead. But fulfilling your own desires is not a potent enough reason to keep going. It has to be, and it has to be one's own spiritual awakening and enlightenment, and then doing something for the world, I think, in my way of seeing it, right? Or fulfilling one's true will, or making one's contribution to the world. And it's different for everyone. So, but that's a long-winded way of saying, if you have a compelling enough reason why, and when I say compelling, it's not compelling until it makes you cry when you write it down. I mean this literally, or you say it out loud, even a little bit, even once, right? Even for half a second. Right? That's fine. It's not compelling enough until you get that type of emotional response from contemplating what you're doing. Then it's compelling, when you get the physical response from it. And it may change over time. With that, discipline is easy. Without it, it just becomes a question of mechanics, and mechanics is not enough.
Okay, that's very helpful. I've experienced that before in other arenas, perhaps unconsciously, through physical fitness or other goals that I've had in my life. I don't want to take up too much more time since we only have an hour. I guess the final thing on that is, that's sort of more why I've been doing it as a process of self-improvement, because I realized I couldn't affect my environment until I was basically a better person or a more complete person. And my most recent synchronicity has been discovering basically initiatory writings that I did before I even knew anything about this stuff, like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was
By
sort
the
of
way,
done.
just out of curiosity, just raise your hand. Anybody else in this call? Has anyone else in this call had that experience? Raise your hand in the participant. Look at that.
Which led me, it led me, more towards my, I guess, emotional depths. So I suppose, the last time I felt motivated in the way you described was from a deep emotional place. And I think a lot of that has been discouraged or cut off by society or peer groups or whatever. Yeah. So I guess that's the direction in which my magical explorations will go next. And I'm super excited for this extended program you're doing. The Supercharger course was, like I said, pretty transformative in my life. So
great.
All right, yeah, thanks for your answer on that.
You're welcome.
Like
it's
I said,
roll. Yeah, and just a quick distinction. The process of self-improvement it's not just, okay, yes, we're all trying to get better, right? We're trying to get more healthy, more physically fit, smarter, learn skills, all this. But I want to make a clear distinction in that spirituality is an uncovering process. It's better to look at it as self-integration rather than self-improvement, because you already have you by definition already have everything you need to be enlightened and awakened, right? So it's a question of reintegrating with what you already know to be true at a very, very deep level. And when I say deep, I mean deep that is actually past the personality. So this is why meditation and things like this and reaching towards the higher self, your higher self, your true self, your holy guardian angel, your Atman, your Purusha, your Ogyodes, if that's how it's pronounced. I've never been able to pronounce that right. Your Yidam, your guardian deity, or whatever guardian spirit, whatever language we want to put on it, from whatever culture, it doesn't matter. It's already there, right? And the fact that anyone is even doing magic is really just evidence that it's calling, that attractor is calling you, and you summon me in a sense just as a useful reference point, right? But ultimately the work is already occurring within you.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just here, like I'm the guy in like clown makeup being like, oh yeah, like don't forget to do it, But ultimately processes occur. They're universal processes that occur of their own initiative anyways.
Yeah, I suppose that's a more precise way to put it, because I sort of realized that my life experiences had cut me off from parts of myself that I wasn't able to experience or utilize. So
yeah. And it is an issue in our culture, right? And this is it's interesting. This is why I opened the call with rehumanize yourself. And there's a reason, like in the book of the law, the law says, ye are against the people, O my chosen, right? Now, what does that mean? Well, it depends, it depends how you interpret it, but does it mean, that one should be a sociopath and be Donald Trump? No, I think that what it actually means is, a huge part of magic is deconditioning from social norms. Because if you follow the social norms, I got news for you. You're headed for for landfill, right? Because that's where our whole culture is headed more than ever now. And our culture cuts off almost everything you need, not only to be spiritual, but just to be a human, right? It cuts it all off, almost like a spiritual circumcision. I don't want to be too graphic, but there's a sense in which our culture removes. Well, it can't remove, but it encourages us to turn off very important parts of ourselves. And for instance, openly expressing emotion, particularly for men, openly, being openly sexual in certain ways, being just trusting strangers, right? We're conditioned not to, to be afraid of other people. And in many cases, there are good reasons for these. Those are good things in some senses to teach children because they keep children safe. But by the time we're adults, we're totally neurotic because we've got all these messages that tell us not to be ourselves. And so a big part of magic is just reconnecting with who you are underneath the conditioning. Right?
Sure. Yeah, that's been what I've been experiencing. I'm trying not to take it to Crowley levels.
You don't have to. And I would argue that taking it to Crowley levels is pathological. Let me give an example that's very pertinent to our current time period.
Sort
So
of the opposite end of the spectrum, I guess.
right, it's an overreaction in a way. But let me give an example, right? It's more pertinent to our current time period. In the sexual revolution, well, prior to the sexual revolution, Wilhelm Reich argued quite accurately, I think, that just having a healthy sexual life is very important to mental health and health as a human being, right? And that repression of sexuality, he argued, led to totalitarian politics like fascism and communism and all of this stuff. And I think that broadly, he was a bit of a loon, but there's a lot of truth to that. Now, by the time of the sexual revolution, this got turned into now, he wasn't saying everyone have sex with everyone. He was saying have a healthy sexual life, preferably in a monogamous relationship in which you're just able to fully express yourself. Not everyone should have sex with everyone all the time, and there should be no rules or boundaries on that, because they tried that in the 60s and 70s, and it was a total fucking mess. Sorry, no pun intended. I actually did not intend that. So, and it was, there were too few boundaries. And then now, so if you think about this, like, we now live in a society, a post-sexual revolution society, where we're bombarded with sexual images nonstop, right? Where any kid, 8-year-old, can get on the internet and they're a click away from seeing infinite depictions of every sexual act imaginable, right? With every type of emotional content, most of it negative, behind it, right? And so there is no sense in our society whatsoever that anything about sexuality is hidden or repressed in that way. But I would actually argue that we live in an even more sexually repressed society now, because people are, and I recommend the second episode of Black Mirror is great about this, but we live in a society where we are, again, we're bombarded with totally dehumanizing stuff along these lines. And sexual freedom is not about being able to witness every type of extreme act imaginable. It's about having just a healthy emotional connection with another human being, right? Without there being repressive church structures on it, and just seeing it as a healthy part of human life. But, so this is another example. It's like our culture has gone so far in the other direction that I would argue that we're bombarded with this stuff to the point where we're even more sexually repressed and neurotic now. And we as a generalization, but I would say that many people in society, right? And so I think,
just as a short comment on that, do you think that those human desires, or I guess, have they become a cult in a certain way? Like they're sort of a hidden flow beneath our interactions, like, because like you're saying with anybody can see anything on the internet, that's still nobody admits to it, right? It's all still
I see what
secret.
you're saying.
Yeah, like, so
I think that it's a massive net negative for society. I don't know.
Right.
I think it's more culture than cult at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But it creates a split in people's psyches, and I think it's bad for people. I think that people should view it as a narcotic, right? As hard drugs,
sort of the sexual version of heroin, or psychological version of heroin. Or
yeah,
whatever.
I mean, and it affects people's brains and all this stuff. And I don't know why we're talking about this issue in specific, but I think that it's. I'm just using this as an example of when we talk about thelema, when we talk about your true will, the point is finding the golden mean, right? The balance, like what's good for you, what's right for you, right? And that's going to be different for everyone. This is why it's not a thing of like, oh, there's one religious top-down rule for everyone, right? It's going to be different for everyone, but you've got to find your healthy balance that's native to you, that is not imposed from outside. And in terms of internet pornography and things like that, it's not just internet pornography, but we live in a porn. I'm turning into a Christian minister, I swear, but in my dotage. But I agree with them on a lot of things. I watch right-wing Christian radio, and it's like a lot. Sometimes I agree with them on a lot of things, but I think that we live in a culture that is a pornographic culture in a sense. And what I mean by that is it's not just the consumption of hardcore pornography on the internet openly available to everyone, which I think has a massively negative effect on people. And it's not because of the sexuality or whatever type of sexuality. I think people should be able to do whatever they want as long as it's consenting adults, and they should if they want to. It's a great way to learn and to grow as a human being. That said, we have to look at the content of this, the presupposition, if you will, that so much of it is just done in a dehumanizing context. And so much of the emotional content of that stuff is seeing other people as things, or as things to be attacked and destroyed. I think it's very, very bad for everyone concerned. I think it's bad, particularly for the people that consume it. And it becomes an addiction. And I don't think but I don't think it's just that. I think that if you look at, obviously, we're bombarded with that type of imagery but softened, like softcore, in all of our entertainment, on Instagram, on everywhere. But it's not even just sexual. I would say that we can see the urge to almost like destroy people, like in our political, just look at Trump and his attitude to people in the political sphere, without making this too political, or
right.
The YouTube,
or like
genre,
inhabit their lives in a sort of way,
or people attacking each other online, or if we look at the YouTube genre, Ben Shapiro destroys feminists. There's obviously like an extremely aggressive, hateful kind of pornographic element to that, just under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Peterson destroys feminist. Well, it doesn't sound too different from a Pornhub title, right? So I don't think I think that people have been hypnotized in this way, and one of the reasons they've been hypnotized into thinking that it's a freedom of expression, when it's really just narcotics. And I think it's
when they're being mind controlled, essentially, or tricked.
Well, not really,
or hypnotized by a brilliant.
Not really, because it's consensual, right? I mean, it's kind of like the drugs get left on the table, but nobody tells you have to take them, right? People forget this, but it's just made available, and I think it's you could probably draw parallels to, if we want to make this a bit more extreme, I think it's probably fair to draw parallels with the way that crack cocaine was circulated in Black communities in the 80s. I think we can draw parallels with the way that OxyContin has been pushed on most of this country. And you just have to ask, well, who does it serve? I mean, it serves the powers that be to have people narcotized in this way, these digital narcotics, so that they're flaccid and useless, for lack of a better way of putting it. And it encourages people to see each other as things to be used, which is it's the inherent ideology of capitalism. It's the capitalism at its most severe and pure, in a way. It's like it's no different than going to the imperialist urge to go to a country and strip mine it and take everyone out of the village and turn them into coal miners or something like that, or make Nike shoes. So people become infected with the user ideology of capitalism, and then made complicit, in a sense, with evil. Anyways, I'm on a total rant.
Yeah.
And likewise, get me off this, but
you answered my question in a way that I've experienced before, so I don't want to monopolize the entire hour.
We gotta pull me back here.
Thanks for your time, Jason. It's great talking to you for the first time, and hopefully I'll be around for the new one.
Congratulations on your practice.